So today, Peric-based Tanya, we're going to get into the grand debate, the ultimate showdown between the Kabbalists and the Philosophers. So who here is a Kabbalist? By raise of hands. There we go. And who's a philosopher? Okay, guys, so don't get into any fights because we're going to find out who is the real deal. And we're going to try to figure out today what is Hashem and whether the Kabbalists or philosophers got it right. Stay tuned. We're going to start off. What were we talking about in this parak? The whole point of the parak is to tell you that the godly soul is mimal mamish, literally from above. It just comes from above. It's a revelation. It's not something you work towards. It's not something that you can try hard at. It's not something you could spend a certain amount of hours meditating and then you graduate to it. It's a present from God. It's a godly thing that no human should be able to really hold on to or attain because it's completely out of our dimension. Not only is it from God, it's part of God himself. So we learned until now that the Rambam was teaching us what? Why we get into the Rambam? Because we said that Hashem, the godly soul comes from Hashem's mind. It says, Yisrael olav machshava. The Jews came up in my mind. So that means the Jewish soul came up in Hashem's mind. And Hashem's mind means it's one with Hashem. Since when is Hashem's so-called mind one with him? Obviously, it's not literally a mind. It, like we know it, like we're going to see from the Rambam. The Rambam says, because what is Hashem? Hashem is the knower, the knowledge, and the known thing, all rolled into one. Hashem is all knowledge. He is the being that knows. What he knows is all the knowledge with the power of knowing, and all those three components are one together. And then he finishes off, and I'm very sorry, but this is not something that a person can really understand. Like it says in the Pasuk, one who tries to understand God, will he find him? You can't really understand God. So the idea of you, the thing you're trying to know, and the power of knowledge, all being one indivisible entity, is above human comprehension. It says, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. It says in the Prophet, you ever been in shul by the Haftarah? And we read out, my thoughts are not like your thoughts. I was once in Mitzrayim in France, and I stopped this guy in Plutzel, this guy in Paris, this American guy in touring, is like in his 40s. We were trying to come into the tefillah, and he wasn't interested. So we're like, oh, come into the nearby shul, come on a tour. He's like, coming to a shul? No way. When I was bar mitzvah, the rabbi made me read the Haftorah, and I've never stepped into shul since then. Fine. So anyway, so what does it say in the Haftorah? My thoughts are not like your thoughts. When we talk about Hashem's thoughts, or any other attribute of Hashem, don't think we mean like a human thought. A little kid thinks that Hashem, you know, I saw it in the letter of the Rebbe? I always suspected this, but then I saw it from the Rebbe. The little kid, his idea of Hashem is a big, strong man in heaven who probably looks like his tati, probably looks like his father, and he has probably big arms, and he can probably beat up all the bad guys. Okay, that's his idea of Hashem. When you get a bit older, you get a bit more mature and realize that Hashem's not a person. He's not physical. So the Rambam's telling you, for a mature person, you should know that Hashem is knowledge, knower, and known thing all in one. Now, there's a big, big problem with this. You know what's a big, big problem with this? That we just had a description for Hashem. We just limited God to knowledge. So the Rambam, who's like the head of team philosophers, is going to be trying to figure out what's God and say, oh, it's knowledge. That's the deepest, most powerful force in existence. That is what God is. That's the creator of heaven and earth. How do you define him? As the knower, the knowledge, and the known at once. Now you're going to have Team Kabbalists come in. And they're going to say, no. Hold up a second. Did you just try to define God? Did you just put God in a box of he is knowledge and not other things? God is unlimited. God is infinite. You can't describe him as knowledge or as knower or known or all three at once. What if God could be not knowledge? He could be more than knowledge. He could be less than knowledge. He could be all of those at the same time. You can't give any definition to Hashem. How can you define Hashem? You're putting him in a box according to what makes sense to you? So which one do you guys think is right? Do you think the Kabbalists, led by the Maharal, who say, you ready for what the Maharal says over here? He says like this. He's very upset with the Rambam. He says, do we call Hashem... Here he is. He says, do we call Hashem the intellect, blessed be he? We don't call God the intellect, blessed be he. We say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be he. And the meaning of holiness is separate, removed. Kadosh and Nivdal in Hebrew. It means above and beyond anything that we can understand or attain. So, Hashem is above and beyond and removed from and any form of physicality or any form of description within the human mind. So, he is one simple entity that's beyond description. So now we have our fight, our showdown. Is God knowledge or is God the infinite that has no description? So I'd say that the Kabbalist approach sounds a lot more attractive, no? So it's infinite beyond description. Not going to help us very well with our chapter of Tanya, where we were saying that the fact that says the Yisrael ol machshava, that Israel arose in my thought, Hashem says, we were trying to prove that, if we come from Hashem's thought, we come from Hashem himself. Because the Rambam says that Hashem is the knowledge. That's not going to help us very well if Hashem is not knowledge anymore. He's the infinite, undescribable. So, thankfully, with this epic showdown proportions between the Rambam and the Maharal, the Rambam leading team philosophy and the Maharal leading team Kabbalah, which for the record, Maharal is not strictly a philosopher. Everyone looks at him as a philosopher, but I believe he chose to write his Sfarim in the style of philosophy, although it seems from the Rebbe that the Rambam clearly studied Kabbalah. Clearly he was a student of Kabbalah, but for whatever reason he decided that his works are going to be written in the style of philosophy. Sometimes you'll be able to find in there hints towards the Kabbalah. But that's why we're putting him as the leader of that team, even though he is not exclusively not on side Kabbalah. So, you ready for the arbitrator, the middleman, comes in? That the Rambam lived maybe 1,000 years ago, 900 years ago. Let's go with about 1,000 years ago. The Maharal lived about 400 years ago? Maharal lived 400 years ago?
450.
Maybe a little more than that. Yeah, 450. So we're going to have to bring in the Arizal. Now, Arizal, who is known by some in Grobevete as the father of modern Kabbalah, and the Arizal is going to teach us how, believe it or not, they're both right. They're both right. How are they both right? They're complete opposites. One's Hashem's description, one's Hashem's beyond description. So the answer is like this. You ready for the Arizal teaches? He teaches that it depends on the context. It's all relative. You guys know Yoel's theory of relativity? Yoel Khan always taught his students that it's Venzach Umretz in his class in Yiddish. Depends where you're talking about. It's all relative to the context. That every time a student would ask me in class, what does this mean? How can you say this over here and you contradict it over there? He said, it's all relative. It's Venzach Umretz. It's relative. It depends where we're talking about. It depends on the context. So one time he gave out a test. So one of his students was a smart boy, and he wrote the answer to every question. It depends on the context. It's all relative. So he got a 0. So he asked Rabbi Yoel, how can you give me a 0? This is what you answer to everything. So why can't I answer it? So he answered, it depends on the context. So, anyways, it all depends on the context. That's Rabbi Yoel's theory of relativity. It's all relative. That if you're looking at what's Hashem, Hashem is obviously above and beyond the worlds. And he is completely indivisible and simple. And there's no form of description that you can put on him. But when you look at how Hashem puts himself into the world, now you have a different problem. When Hashem puts himself into creation, Hashem created something that comes out of him that's wisdom, understanding, knowledge, kindness, severity. Hashem has all these different forms of description. Now, in our debate, we would have assumed that the team Kabbalah says Hashem is the infinite, and then all these forms of expression are just outcomes of Hashem. But Hashem is not that. As opposed to, from the view of the philosophers would say, kindness or severity or wisdom, that is Hashem. The Arizal taught us that Hashem is above that. But when Hashem comes down to express himself in the way of kindness or wisdom within the spheres of Atzilus, there all those forms of expression are nullified to him, are part of him, and are one with him. So therefore, within the worlds, within existence, within the place where dimensions exist, within Atzilus, Hashem is the wisdom. Why? Because wisdom, even though it's a description, is a description that Hashem made which is one with him, which is completely nullified to him, which is just an expression of himself with himself within that expression. So therefore it's correct. When you learn Torah and you're learning Hashem's wisdom, you could say, I'm becoming one with Hashem right now. And you don't need to put like a little apostrophe down the bottom and be like, I'm not really becoming one with Hashem, really, it's just Hashem's wisdom. Because that is Hashem, because he invested himself in that wisdom. That's an expression of him that's one with him. When you're giving tzedakah, you're putting a coin in a pushka and you're expressing the kindness of Hashem. You could say you're becoming one with Hashem right now, because that kindness is completely one with Hashem. As opposed to, if you zoom out a bit, above the worlds, beyond our dimensions of what we understand, you can say, what is Hashem? That's just Hashem is a simple, pure entity of being, the being. Now, this whole conversation, now that we've concluded our discussion, this whole thing works not only with Hashem, but with souls. Because it says about souls, Hashem said, let's make man in our image. So, man is made in the image of Hashem. Yeah? So therefore, the soul, it also works like that. You can have exactly the same debate. Is your soul your wisdom, Chokhmah, which you're going to find in Tanya? The whole Tanya is going to tell you that what's the essence of the soul is Chokhmah Shebenefesh, the wisdom. That is the ultimate. The point of wisdom, the point that you bring up new ideas in, that is the essence of the soul. Then the Alter Rebbe is going to tell you in other Maimarim, such as in Parashat Vayikra of Likutei Torah and many other places, that he uses a very interesting line here that you don't really see very often. This that we said in Tanya, that what is a soul? It's wisdom, understanding, knowledge, kindness, severity. The soul is. It's